Hi, I'm Greg Gillen with Reynolds, and this is Connected. Today I have an in-studio guest. His name is Chris Gologanoff. I've known Chris for a long time, working together at Reynolds in different capacities. But Chris was going to join me today. He was actually on episode 50 of Connected. That was way back in October of 2020. It seems like a world ago. He was going to join me today to revamp a conversation that he had on the podcast back then about lead capturing and nurturing. But with everything going on in our industry right now, and all of the concerns out there and dealers being resilient as they always are, we thought we'd shift the conversation a little bit today to talk more about how dealers are reacting to being down, how the industry is reacting, how we're all helping one another, and some best practices. So, Chris, thanks so much for joining.
Sure. Good morning.
So, Chris, your background, and maybe you can share some of this, but I've known you, you've had a lot of different roles and a lot of different experience. Some of it in sales and kind of working with dealerships in the sales end, some of it in the networking and cybersecurity space. So I thought your perspective, we kind of had this scheduled and then the world blew up over the last week. Fitting. So I thought, your background and perspective would be really valuable. So I appreciate you hopping on. Maybe if you don't mind, to share a little bit more detail about, even what you did before Reynolds and kind of the roles that you've had here.
Okay. Well, before Reynolds, I worked for a managed service provider. And for those of you who don't know what that is, it's basically a local IT company that takes on all of a customer's IT. So when I started here at Reynolds, I focused specifically on networking products, firewall, network security, et cetera. And then I moved from that, or transitioned from that into more of our phone system, which was a huge launch. And then now I kind of work with both the phone system and with a lot of our Proton network security teams, just on making sure if there's any questions when it comes from either IT related or networking or phone related, we can get those questions answered, get everybody helped out.
Yeah, that's great. So again, your background I really appreciate, and I'm excited to talk a little bit. So today I don't want to obviously skew into any speculation about what's going on out there in the world, but did want to talk about just what you've been hearing from dealers. You get to talk to a lot of dealers every day, about how they're handling this, right? How they're operating, the things that they've done. Obviously, if your DMS is down, that really hinders your business. But, we operated in a manual world in this business for a long time, right? You can still negotiate a deal. You can still write a contract. So can you talk a little bit about, what's being impacted, whether it's from a communication perspective and how dealers are reacting there, or just manual processes and things like that? Anything that stood out to you that others might benefit from hearing?
Well, I think the most common question that's been coming to us is like best practices and stuff like, okay, what do you think we should be working on? And it's like, you mentioned it, it's gone back to a manual world. So really what we need is what's the easiest way to continue to do business, as well as collect all the data, so that when we do have time in the future when things are back up to normal, we can collect that data, follow up with that data, do what we were doing before. I like to say that we paid for all these leads, so we need to keep track of where they came from, who called them, who followed up with them, et cetera. So I think just collecting that information and then being able to put it into the system so you can continue to operate as close to normal as possible. That's probably what we're hearing the most right now, is like, what's the best way of doing that? And I think, we mentioned some of the things that Reynolds is offering on the back end side with desking products and some different forms, et cetera. But I think from a sales perspective, just writing everything down. I know it sounds ancient at this point, but like writing everything down and being able to just say, okay, here's who called, here's who we spoke to, here's what they were looking for. Is that something that we're going to follow up on? Here's the dates that I followed up on that. And then when things are back up and running, all that can go back into the CRM or back into the DMS, however you're tracking, whatever the solutions are, and following up and tracking that, so that long term, the customer's never going to know anything happened for a couple of weeks span, in June of 2024.
Yeah. So do you see that most effective as kind of like an Excel document, a Google Sheets doc, something where your sales team all has access to it and they update it? Is it different tabs? Is it different documents? To me, it seems like, okay, if my CRM's down, right, and I still need to capture this information, is that most effectively done at the salesperson level individually, right? And then so that person has to go back once the CRM's back up. We're going to go and then import that information, copy paste into the CRM, or is it more of a shared spreadsheet where we have a centralized location for all of our notes? Some salespeople may or may not like that.
Yeah.
But what are you seeing as kind of that best practice? Because I assume you still want it digitally so that it's an easy copy paste once you're back up. Not that it'll be simple by any stretch, but much easier than writing everything down and then retyping it.
Yeah, I think so. Ideally, I think what you'd want is a shared document that both managers and salespeople can see, and then that way they can make. So if it is something that gets escalated or needs to be followed up on, a manager can focus on, okay, did we call this person back? What did we tell them? Do we set the right expectations date wise when they can come in and do their appointments, et cetera. Real world wise, though, I don't know if that's always best. I don't know if you've already trained all these people into putting everything into a CRM, and we all know that that's hard enough to get them to put it in there. Right. They may be writing a bunch of stuff down on paper, and it's like that may be what works for them. Either way, you're going to want to have some type of records so that you're following up and making sure that stuff does get put in. So even if it's going to be like, okay, well, I can get 9 out of 10 of these guys to put their notes into a shared Google Doc or spreadsheet or something. One guy that does his sales his own way, he may want to write it down or go back to the old way of just notebook, pen and paper. It's not going to hurt, and then you can scan that, put that into the same folder, and that way, however you do decide you want to put them in later, whoever's responsible for that, they're just going to have to go through everything and either create new people or put it in underneath the correct prospects or new customers. Yeah.
So if you're doing a spreadsheet, would you set it up where, in my head, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to have essentially a line for each customer, right? And then I would just have whatever the information is, right? First name, last name, phone, email, kind of contact info.
Yep.
And then notes. And then I'm assuming like a column for each update on the notes. Is that how you would do it too? So I'd go like, whatever today is, June 26th. Right, so June 26th, note, and then tomorrow, June 27th, would be the next column over, but it's on the same line with that customer, so everything's together with a prospect?
Exactly. I would either do that. The only thing I would add would be, what's the next step? So what is the next process? So that way, maybe you want to color code it so you're, these are green, but like I reached out, left a voicemail in the CRM tool. The next step after voicemail would be email the next day, text message, second voicemail, whatever that is. Just making sure that you have that next step put in there so that whoever is managing that document can say, like, hey, did you ever give this person a call?
Yeah.
And they can update the notes. The one thing you don't want is for things to just be to completely change and go back to like, hey, everybody's responsible for all their own leads and there's no follow-up activity schedule. You want to keep people as regimented as possible when it comes to like, okay, second day email, third day phone call, whatever that is, whatever schedule you think is best, following up as closely as you can. Honestly, customers, they may hear about this. They may not hear about some of the issues about customers, but you want to make it look like as normal as possible when they show up to where they're not concerned, or even the follow-up like, hey, I sent in an internet lead the other day. No one called me, so I called you. What do I need to do to come in and test drive this vehicle?
Yeah.
That would be, okay, what do we need to do to make sure that this person has as good of experience as possible now that they've reached out?
Yeah. That's good. And then, when you think about, so you mentioned managing your own leads, but I go back to like when I was selling, right? And we all did in some way, shape, or form, right? A daily work plan. And so I would, and this is how long ago it was, but I would literally have a yellow legal pad and I'd look at my CRM and I go through all my activities for the next day and I would prioritize them on paper, right? And I'd order them and then I'd go back into the CRM and then I prioritize them. So I had my entire day laid out for me. Usually it was about 40 calls. And from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., basically, I would have everything laid out for me so I could come in and just start going. And that was how I ended every day. So when I think about a daily work plan then, is that more of a manual process like a yellow legal pad? Or, should that maybe be an Excel spreadsheet where you're talking about follow-up, right? So, okay, I talked to Chris. Next steps are I need to email tomorrow. Then do I go into my, my own kind of daily work plan, I'll call it. It's just an Excel sheet. Maybe it's another tab on my workbook. And okay, for tomorrow, the 27th or whatever, I need to email Chris about his appointment. Something like that. Like, does that all make sense, or is there a different way to do that?
I think like individually that might be how you want to run it. I think Maybe there was something like, so if there's a bunch of internet leads come out and you handed out, you partition them to different people.
Yeah.
That's something that a tool was doing for you that now you're going to have to do that manually. So I think like once as a manager, you put those on each individual person, I think you're right with the legal pad. You kind of set up your own day and you can manage it that way. I think from an overall lead perspective, it really depends on how the lead's coming in, who they usually go to, if it's something that the BDC follows up with versus the actual individual sales plan or team. If it's something that we're just trying to set an appointment versus somebody that we've actually worked with before and they're coming back in to get specific pieces of information. Those, depending on how that customer is used to contacting, if any of that contact has changed and now it's gone to more manual, like phone, text message, email process, to the sales managers or even to the individuals, I think the goal is to make sure that the managers know what's going on, and that way if things don't fall through the cracks.
Yeah.
And like at an individual level, I think, notepad, having that yellow pad with your personal daily work plan, that's how I like working it. That used to be done by a tool and now it can still be done by a pen and paper. So I think it's something that may be different for people, but it's also still works.
Yeah. So you mentioned lead distribution there. What do you see in dealers do as kind of a best practice? So there's obviously different ways to handle it, right?
Sure.
And so a lead comes in from your website or your chat tool or whatever it might be, cars, wherever, right? Leads are going to come in. ADF format spits into the CRM, distributes the lead. So that distribution, by now, everybody I'm sure has already updated this, but what are you seeing work as a best practice? Is that to send it to, so do you change that email distribution to your sales manager? Do you set up a shared email inbox where multiple people have access to it? Maybe it's your sales manager, new sales manager, used sales manager, just so that it's always covered.
Yeah.
A BDC manager, maybe, I don't know. Or are there different ways to do it?
I would say it really depends on if you have a BDC today, and if they get the most of the leads that are coming in originally. Like the original lead that comes in, how are those usually dispersed? And if it goes to a BDC, I would leave that exactly the same, just maybe change the way the BDC updates everybody. They're not putting notes into a CRM. Maybe they're sending it via email or something that can be tracked and then to a salesperson or an appointment set up. If you don't have a BDC, which a lot of places still go, they either like round robin it out to their salespeople, or if it's somebody, they try to follow up and see if that person's bought a car before so they can continue to link them with the same salesperson. Maybe do a little bit of that research on like, hey, are you a new customer that worked here with somebody here before, and then get it into their hands. But I do think that shared drive or something that everybody can see is the best way to do it. But I also think if you overcomplicate it, it ends up not happening anyway. So then like you might as well, whatever plan you think is going to work for you, put that plan in place and run with it, on this temporary basis. And then afterwards, when things do get put back into the CRM or back into the system, you can follow up with it the same way you would do it before. And then some of those leads as they're gone in and have been dispersed, the people that, they get linked to the different salespeople, they would, they'd be able to follow up the same way they would before on the same schedule. They may just have to jump a couple steps in the schedule. Now we're in step 8, where we would have called them 2 weeks ago, step 1.
Right. So thinking about that information getting back into the CRM, maybe the good news is it's summertime and maybe you can pick up some part-time help or some intern help or something like that.
That'd be great, yeah.
That does speak to the importance of having good notes, though, right? Because you can't expect somebody then who doesn't necessarily know the business and doesn't know the customer to come in and just understand some chicken scratch, right? So you have to have good notes that you want copied and pasted probably.
I always used to joke that my notes, I knew exactly what they were. So I'm putting together my daily work plan. I know exactly what needs to happen for this, but you almost have to put the notes in the system thinking that somebody else is going to be reaching out to them and contacting them. So if I was off on Wednesday or I'm going on my own vacation or whatever, and someone's following up for me, that person runs with it the same exact way. They know exactly what's happened, either phone calls, email, texting, back and forth, chat, whatever has happened to contact them originally, that's kind of being followed up on. And even notes as easy as this person always responds over text but never picks up the phone. Why would somebody else want to waste their time than giving that guy a phone call when you can just text him and know that you're going to get a response? So,
no, that's a good point. Okay. All right, so thinking about maybe shifting gears a little bit. So sales, it's been, an uphill battle, but still getting cars over the curb, right, and making things happen. And I think your point about lead follow-up is a good one, and making sure that we're connecting with those leads, because, again, to the consumer, I mean, they're empathetic, but if they want to buy a car, they want to buy a car.
Exactly.
So if you can help them, let's do that. But shifting gears, thinking about where a lot of the real, I guess, gridlock is right now, it seems like, and maybe you're hearing other things, is in parts and in the business office, right? Because with parts, you can't see inventory availability. A lot of cases, you can't order from the manufacturer if that's connected to the DMS. A lot of them have automated parts fulfillment essentially, and in the business office, obviously posting deals and getting that stuff finalized and pushed through. That's going to create a huge backlog, right? Things start to stack up. So hopefully we're moving forward at this point, pretty quickly to get all of our dealers back on track. Yep. But you're going to have kind of this mess to clean up. So are you hearing anything the dealers are trying to do to keep from having this giant pile of work to go through once things are back up and running?
Well, I don't know if you can ever clean up the giant pile 100%, but I think what everybody's been talking about is, okay, what are some little things that we can do to mitigate the amount of cleanup process at the end? So, like, keep business running while still, being able to keep track of everything that needs to go in afterwards. So whether that's from a manual perspective, if you're putting in, like, manual parts orders or something, maybe keeping track of all those things with some type of form, the way we would use, parts people would used to put orders in.
Yeah. Hey, I used to look up parts in a catalog.
Yeah.
Right? I was post. What were those machines called? The fish. Microfish.
Oh,
we still had in the parts store that I grew up in. Like, there was still one back there, kind of back in the corner, but I never had to use it. I used like the paper catalogs, but so that stuff's like.
So it's not like it's not possible. I just think there's a lot of people that have moved away from it, and they either don't remember or don't want to remember how to go back to that process because it was very manual. But I think right now the goal would be to do as much of it as you can and then put a process together so it's not 5 people doing 5 different things. It's 5 people doing the same thing. So when we do go back to clean it up, it's less of a mess to clean up. It's the same thing for everybody. So if you're like, where did this order come from, or who called in for this or whatever, everything's listed and documented. And then you can say, okay, here's how we would have done that before. I'll key that back in, or like you mentioned, having maybe some interns or something key some of that back in.
Sure.
That piece would be fairly easy to set up. Hey, this is what we need to do. Just take these tickets, and I know it might be a little confusing, but take all these tickets, put them in this way. A couple of days, everything's in the system, and then we're all back to normal.
Yeah. One of the other things that I've seen happen in a little bit, at least over the weekend, was sourcing parts from kind of aftermarket retailers versus from the manufacturer. So making sure that we can get vehicles out the door, with parts, whatever's needed. So if that customer needs their vehicle back, right, you got to be able to take care of them. So just getting creative with sourcing parts and sourcing a lot of that stuff if necessary.
Yeah.
Chris, one of the other things I wanted to pick your brain on, cybersecurity is something that you have a background in. And, cybersecurity is an extremely front of mind topic right now. And we've seen it kind of ebb and flow as far as where it fits in our mind share, right? Because it's one of those things that always has been and always will be extremely important. I mean, you can't understate how important it is. But when something like what's happening in our industry right now is happening, it's front of mind for everybody, right? So when you think about dealers, what are, again, in your experience with the IT background and the cybersecurity background, what are some of the steps that dealers can take today, if they haven't already, just to make sure that they're as prepared as possible for if anything like this were to happen to them?
Well, I think the word prepared is the best way to describe it, because I don't know if you can ever prevent it, but you can definitely prepare. And I think the most important piece of that preparation is if you make it hard enough, really for any criminal activity, but specifically with cyber criminals, I think what they're looking for is a low-hanging fruit. I heard somebody the other day that they used to send out 10,000 letters and were hoping to get a 0.5% response rate with actual letters in the mail, right? So now they're sending 100,000 emails, but still expecting that same 0.5, but it's so much easier to do it over email. And I think just some smaller things to make it more difficult, like don't make it easy for them being the cyber criminals, don't make it easy for them to focus or pinpoint their activity on you because you're making mistakes internally. So I always go back to, easy things like multi-factor authentication, a good password management policy where you're changing passwords on a regular basis. They have to have, multiple keys. I think the most important is probably the employee training though. So There's a lot in there right now where employees, what do I say? I've heard people say like hackers aren't the reason for a cyber breach. It's employees that are the reason for a cyber breach. And what I mean by that is somebody internally made a mistake, clicked on something they shouldn't have, did something on a website or gave information to somebody they shouldn't have. And now that hacker or cyber criminal has that information and is going to try to use that to get into your system. And then once they're in the system, being able to monitor that. So I think the other piece is having the software tools to protect your environment, your network, to make sure that if something did happen, somebody sees it, they get an alert on it. And the most important piece to that is actually taking action on that alert. So a ton of tools out there right now. Okay, this happened on this PC at this date. I send a text message alert to, this IT person, and then they looked at the alert, or maybe they didn't even notice the alert because they get so many of them and did nothing. The most important piece is you get those alerts, you have a team of people that are there to monitor that and then take action, whether it be quarantine that off the network or figure out if there's anything internally that they need to shut down or do, maybe a good backup policy or backups for some of those things in case something were to happen. But there's two parts to an alert, just like there's two parts to an alarm system or there's the actual alert and the alarm, and then there's the what are we going to do about it. And if you don't have both of those, then you really just don't have anything.
Okay, yeah, that's good. So what I think I heard 4 kind of things that are, kind of make sure you get these boxes checked things. So
easy MFA.
Yep.
Easy, I should say easy, a password policy that makes it more difficult. Training your employees on, especially specifically for phishing emails or emails that are malicious. Yep. And then the 4th being that alert plus action policy, where it's like, this is what happens when an alert comes in and this is what we're going to do about it. And those, I know a lot of companies outsource their IT. Follow up with your IT people, make sure that they're doing action on the alerts. Yep. If you're doing that in-house, make sure your in-house person or people are able to what's the plan if an alert were to happen. And then having a policy like, okay, well, this happens when we get an alert. What are we going to do? And then, quarantine the PC, check the PC, use our software, whatever we got to do. I think all of those are different things that you can do just to be a little bit more proactive on making yourself not an easy target. And what's going to happen is they're going to focus on easy targets.
Yeah. No, that's fair. It's a concerning.
Very concerning.
Yeah, it's difficult, and again, it's top of mind right now, and I think our entire industry needs to and is on high alert. So, Chris, wanted to also touch base real quick on a few things that Reynolds is doing, and then I'm curious if you've heard any other stories in the industry. So, just trying to help, right? And we're, it's one of these things where this industry. You've been in it for a long time. I've been in it for a long time. It's, I think, the greatest industry on the planet, and that the reason for that is how everybody rallies together. Yeah, we all have our individual goals, but when we're faced with a big challenge, it seems like the industry comes together, and
because it affects everybody. As soon as it affects one side of it, the other side feels it as well. So
yeah. For us, we've certainly ramped up our production in our printing facility up in Salina. We've been shipping out printed forms same day. That's been one that's been, a big push, making sure that we have everything staffed and we have inventory that we can ship out. So we're getting things shipped out same day. That's been a big one for customers, and for new dealers too. We opened up our desking tool to customers using e-leads. Because obviously they're down our desking tool. We want to make sure that our software is available if they need it. We're even looking at ways that we may be able to leverage, our allied. It's actually it's a F&I portal that we leverage for allied markets. So specialty retailers, RV retailers, those types of businesses, those types of dealers. But a lot of the same forms apply, right? So power of attorney, ODOM statements, those types of things. So App One is the name of that product. We're looking at offering that to customers that may need it. Certainly, a lot of the forms can be done through a Route 1 or a dealer track, but oftentimes not all of them. So making sure that they have access to those types of forms is important. Anything else that you've heard from dealers? And if not, that's okay.
Well, not specifically. I think you mentioned getting creative before, though. Just because it's not something that maybe we have proactively offered or something, that doesn't mean you couldn't contact somebody like, this would really help us, if you guys could make this happen, if Reynolds can make this happen, or if your other vendor can make this happen. I do feel that the industry is trying to take care of itself right now and each other. I think if you did have any ideas or creative ideas on how Reynolds could help, reach out to your Reynolds document specialist, reach out to your Reynolds account manager, anybody that you really know here at Reynolds. I know, like I said, we're all trying to help. We're all in the same boat. If there's something that we could do or turn on or change, and it's something that'd be fairly easy for us to do, I think we'd look into it and take care of you. So
yeah, you can send them to me. I'll make sure they get to the right place.
Exactly, same thing. Me too.
We'll make it happen.
I think it's a very trying time right now for everybody, and I know it's the goal is to get back to normal as soon as possible, and I think that's what everybody's goal is, because it makes everything move and flow easier.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. Well, Chris, I definitely appreciate your time. Not the conversation we planned on having, but no. I think it was a timely one and a good one for sure. Anything that we didn't touch on that you wanted to, or anything you had to add, other than we kind of went all over the place. So
no, we did. Like I said, I think the biggest thing would be to communication. Keep up communication with either your account managers or whoever you have in touch with. Keep up that communication, because it's a temporary problem. Where hopefully we get to like a long-term solution where everything gets back to normal.
Yep, very good. Well, Chris Gologanoff, thanks so much for joining me. It's always a pleasure, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Talk to you later.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Chris Gologanoff. He definitely has a lot of experience throughout the industry. And again, it wasn't what we were planning on talking about, but it seemed like the appropriate conversation to have. So hopefully you were able to take a few nuggets from that. Definitely appreciate you joining. And if you do have ideas or things that could help, please don't hesitate to reach out. That's a sincere offer. So before we hop off, don't forget, you can watch or listen to all episodes of Connected on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify podcasts. So make sure to hit subscribe, and that way you're notified every other week when new episodes are released. Thanks so much, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.